editor at O Globo. He now works for Casas y Associates, which many of you may know in Barcelona. They're experts in visual design, and that really speaks to Chico's background in visual design for both newspapers and digital. So I think Lauren's going to start with a presentation, and then Chico's going to sit down with her and ask a few questions. So Lauren, Chico, over to you. Please do come through.
Hello, and thank you so much to Gen Summit and the organizers for having us today. So just shy of 6 months ago, Condé Nast International launched Vogue Business. It's a new digital B2B publication for the fashion industry. It was the first B2B title ever launched by Condé Nast International, or CNI, and it marked a wholly new way for us to launch a publication. It was also the first. So just over the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about why CNI got into the B2B space, how we got to launch, and what we learned along the way. I hope you find it a useful case study for how we test and launch new products at CNI, and that it challenges you to think differently about newsletters and the role of users in product development. Am I doing this correctly? Okay, good. So just to give you some business context, first of all, in 2017, CNI performed a strategic review and identified B2B products for the fashion industry as an area for growth for us outside of advertising revenue. But up until this point, there was no formal framework for launching new businesses at CNI. So we set up a business development unit, and working with an outside consultancy, that team developed a 5-stage innovation framework, which was designed to enable CNI, but also our 31 markets, to test and launch new business concepts. So Vogue Business was the first product to graduate from this framework. In other words, we were the guinea pig. So our first step was to identify a product and a potential customer, and then to deeply learn the needs of that customer. That's about asking the biggest questions. So for us, we didn't go out and say, what editorial product is missing from the fashion industry? Instead, we asked, what's holding you and your teams back from being more productive? In the end, we held close to 80 interviews with cross-section of the global fashion industry, and we had constant follow-up user research. And quickly, some patterns started to emerge. You know, the people that we spoke to, their businesses are operating in 100 or more countries, and they felt they really lacked a truly global understanding of the fashion industry. A lot of the regions don't have their own local trade publications, so not only did they not have a global understanding, they didn't even know what was going on in their own markets. Second, there was a lack of usable information about technology and the impact that was going to have on fashion. They told us they wanted more insights on consumer behavior and cultural trends. And lastly, they had no time to read this publication, so if we could deliver this to them in features that weren't 2,000 words, that would be great. So these findings were great news for us. CNI operates in 31 regional markets. We have 25 Vogues. We know the fashion consumer and the best talent in those markets. Currently, we use that information to create beautiful consumer magazines and compelling advertising experiences. But could we use that intelligence network to create a B2B product? That was our thinking. So once we had our customer insights, once we had our customer insights, we entered phase 2, and that was really, we just brought together and isolated a team of 6 people to start working on this project to identify the customer and to refine the idea. And so the initial team was made up of a project manager, a UX researcher, a designer, a marketing specialist. We had an outside consultant, and myself as subject matter expert. By the end of 2 weeks, we had multiple layering loading. By the end of 2 weeks, we defined our KPIs and we were ready to start testing. We had very specific assumptions to explore, but these can really be summarized in 2 questions. 1, can we aggressively grow an audience of engaged senior fashion professionals around the world, and can we create something different enough to make this valuable? To run this test, we decided to set up a newsletter on Mailchimp. It was easy, it just required 1 editor and 1 designer. We put it under the disposable name of Perspective. This, as you know, using a name like Vogue in a beta context would have been challenging, so we launched this very anonymously. We recruited a closed beta of 250 people, and they were drawn from our contacts in the markets. And we later figured out actually that group was way too small if we wanted to do A/B testing, so we expanded it to 1,000. We began testing out all of our assumptions about the product. That included editorial tone, subject matter, community elements. Some worked, some we had to phase out quite quickly. All the while, we were gathering lots of information via surveys, polls, phone calls, emails, and just getting that feedback from readers. At the end of all this, we hit our targets for growth, engagement, and had proven to the business that this was differentiated enough. So after finalizing our business model and our P&L, our parent company, Advance, decided to fund. Next, we needed to develop this into a mature product. What was our mission and vision, our P&L? What product solutions did we need? We also needed a name. Would we call this Condé Nast something? Vogue something? Armed with user research and a lot of opinions, both within and without, from within and without the business, as well as our own gut feel, we chose Vogue Business. We at C&I are incredibly cautious about lending the Vogue name to anything. When you hear the name Vogue Business, you know it's about fashion, you know it's about business. But using the Vogue name brings risks to our other Vogue teams. So we had to ensure again that the business understood the monetary and reputational risks of launching this under the Vogue name. And then phase 4, accelerate, we really just mapped out everything we needed to get to launch, communications plans, points of differentiation. We also had to define the visual landscape. We are part of the Vogue family, but we also aren't Vogue. So how do we convey that visually? Love these multi-loading slides. So next we worked on our launch strategy. We knew that it just so happened that Apple's most highly anticipated earnings report in years coincided with our launch date. We knew if we were going to launch a publication under the Vogue name, the fashion industry would automatically pay attention. But how do we make sure that we also got in front of business and technology readers who should be reading us but maybe think that they shouldn't because of the name? So we secured Apple Retail's Senior Vice President, Angela Ahrens. She'd been former CEO of Burberry, had an amazing tenure there, and then she'd gone to Apple to head up retail for 5 years, and besides a sort of TV interview, she'd really not spoken at all. So getting her was definitely a get. And we flew our critic Susan Menkes out to Washington, D.C., and she interviewed Angela about what was wrong with retail and how are we going to fix it. So we announced our launch with an FT exclusive on the 28th of January, and it was quickly picked up by other outlets globally. On the 29th, we went live and we launched the Angela story, and it got a ton of pickup, and that was great. But it did even better 7 days later when Apple announced that she was leaving the company. So it's been nearly 6 months since we've launched, and the learnings have come hard and fast. When we launched, there was a lot of skepticism from pundits. People wrote that we would be a mouthpiece for brands. They thought the Angela story was too soft. We've made a lot of progress, but it will take time for people to understand our proposition and point of view. Our biggest challenge now is scaling our reader base while ensuring that we reach the right readers who are every bit as engaged as that initial base. That means developing new paths for discovery, optimizing search rankings, doing high-profile stories that make sure we're getting in front of new audiences, and expanding our reach through local editions in local languages. We'll be launching a Mandarin edition in China later this year. But I'd like to finish with just a few thoughts around newsletters and working with users. First, newsletters are great formats for testing new editorial brands and concepts. They require just one editor and a designer. Getting feedback is as simple as asking for a reply to an email. Post-launch, email remains our most valuable channel. We believe our newsletter is the best way to engage a loyal, select, highly engaged audience of industry professionals that will eventually pay for things like subscriptions, memberships, who will come to our events and use us to find jobs. But a publication cannot live in a newsletter environment alone. Initially, that's what we really wanted to do. we thought we could just create this really engaged base, and then we could launch all these other B2B products and services, and just email would be the funnel. But we quickly realized that while it's great for loyalty and engagement, newsletters have limits. You can't find them on search. They're not easily shared on social. So that makes audience acquisition really difficult and expensive. Second, if you ever want to monetize your editorial via subscription, and for us that's very likely, you're going to need a website so that people can register and pay. My last point is to bring your user on the journey with you, not just at the research phase. Our users have been the most valuable partners we've had, and having a full-time UX researcher on the team has made us so much more successful. I think without our readers, they've completely changed the direction pre and post launch. I mean, without them, we would have been a trend publication, probably focused a lot more on runway, and certainly not something that covered primarily finance. Because of them, we've hired a data editor, a data visualization specialist, contributing sustainability editor, and a retail and marketing editor who's really focused on technology and its implementation on stores. As part of that process, it's important to create a feedback loop with those readers. They have to understand we can't just ask them for feedback in every single newsletter. That gets really old. We're constantly asking and not giving. So we're constantly feeding it back about the ways that we've changed the product, specifically based on their feedback and ideas. So that's it. I hope that gives you a little bit into insight into how we launch products and also how we think of newsletters. I'm going to let you take over.
Thank you, Lauren. It's amazing. It's good to see how you can create new ways to launch a product. And my background is from newspapers, and I bring another experience here. For newspapers, for newsrooms of newspapers, a newsletter is not so easy to settle, because it demands lots of time to make it good. In a daily basis, for instance, at the O Globo newspapers in Rio de Janeiro, the morning newsletter can take 2 hours to be made. So, because it's a kind of letter, it's a kind of conversation that people try to establish with the reader, advising them. And then we can see that here in the graphic, that the newsletter, by the end, the 8 newsletters O Globo has doesn't bring so much traffic to the news, to the website, but they are still working to enrich the bundle with the subscriber. The subscription bundle is being enriched by this letter because it's a kind of a direct contact with the readers. In the case of Clarín, the newspaper of Argentina, the Argentina newspaper, they are succeeding on a morning briefing. With an open rate of around 25%. It's 22%. It's so high, so high. No, but they have many other newsletters, like 13, I think. But still, it's not easy for a newsroom to assume that production, And the question, I think, of the headline of this section is very interesting because we do need a website or not, I think this is the point that I would like to stress with you. Because the case of newspaper, the answer for me would be yes or no, and no. Yes, because we are in a kind of a transition. Traditional newspapers are in a kind of a huge transition. And we have accumulated big knowledge in the editing content, in creating content, and serve the best overview we can offer to readers every day. When we think on the printed products, what we do is normally place the content in a way we can make a kind of statement, saying things without reading any word. This is about technology, of editing technology, but in a digital, I think we are going another dimension because a news splash would last maximum 3 or 4 hours in a desktop. And when we think on the mobile, it just blink. The rhythm, sorry. the rhythm and in the speed of the news here, the flow, it's so quickly, so intensive, you know. And still, we are learning to handle with these two dimensions, no? Because we cannot skip yet from the printed edition. I think it's as better quality the printed edition has, as quickly will be and easy will be the transition for digital, no? And thinking on how many people we are talking about, how much people we can reach at today is amazing. We cannot imagine 10 years ago how many people we can reach at with our content, no? And it can be translated in the funnel of audience. If we take the traditional vision, we can have the first figure, the first image on the left. Now, if you think in the unique browsers, we have in the upper side, in the upper funnel segment, we have lots of people. In the bottom side, we have just a few. But if you think in page views, the picture turns upside down, no? And see from the top, what we see in terms of people is like we have just few people that are so loyal, no? But thinking on the income, those people, with those people, we make most of our money, you know, because they come more often, they are very close to us, and they can propose different stuff to them. And this kind of people that likes your brand, that you already have, is a kind of traditional people. They have very traditional hubs, like they like desktops. They use desktops to sign in the subscription. They came directly for your brand. They check you at least once per day, you know? And they provide you lots of page views. So it's a kind of, I think as a newspaper are doing the transition, I think their readers as well, they are get along with this digital dynamic of feeding news, you know? And, and here we can see how these loyal people and subscribers use the device to make a subscription. Mostly, this is the data from Clarin. In the moment they hire a subscription, mostly do that through a desktop. And they normally, when they are logging, they use the desktop as well. So I think everybody are in the same transition, you know? But the point is we need the new readers. And what newspapers are doing is betting on social and SEO strategies. These are two examples of newspapers that are driving to implement, is going to implement a paywall. They are just in this moment, they are enhancing their, the page views, the upper part of the funnel, you know, with a astonishing SEO strategy. And you can see in the case of La Vanguardia in Spain, since they merged the two newsrooms, because it used to be a digital and a printed one, since they merged the two newsrooms in January 2019, they go up to the leadership of the market, almost there. They are very close, they are just one step ahead of the El País, below the País. You know? In the case of the El Comercio, they are keeping the leadership while they are implementing the sign-off before the paywall. It means they are getting they are enlarging the audience, getting the most they can, getting the most data they can from the readers, and then they have the knowledge to send the paywall, you know, and make another actions that. It means, for me, I think the newsletters is a very interesting way to launch a new product, but I think probably you'll answer to me if it's free or not. Probably to a small segment, not for a general audience like newspaper is looking for. No? So I think the point for newspapers is how to move people from upper part of the tunnel down to to make them loyalty and the subscribers and so on. And what we learned working for some newspapers around the world is, first of all, is a good SEO strategy to enlarge this funnel, this upper part of the funnel, but also offering a kind of content that is relevant. You know? In the case of La Vanguardia, they have 3 mandatory aspects. It should be local, should be original, and also should be visual. If you have a video, it's better than if you're not. It's crucial for them. You know? In the case of Globo, we have another experience that is interesting as well, that they reduced the amount of content 20%, increasing the page views per article 32%. It means it's more accurate in terms of knowing what the audience wants, to invite them to go down in the funnel, you know. And I think also seeing around the world, I think this branding is important. In the case of Condé Nast, you always have a very visual content that facilitates to identify who you are. So I think this is very important. We see the case of Lily in the Washington Post, or even the Guardian or the Economist, how important or how interesting can be visual in terms of that in a way that you can identify what the brand is for. I think it's important. You know better than me about that. So I think newsletter and the context of newspaper is used more to have a good conversation with subscribers than take new ones. No, it's in your case it's the opposite. Well, this is I think that I bring these ideas just to contrast a little bit with you, and I would like to ask you how you are handling with the newsletters after the launching, because if it was important in the beginning, so how are you doing right now?
Yeah, I mean, there still are. I mean, we have a newsletter. When we launched, we were just going twice a week. Right now, we're 3 times a week, plus some supplements. We launched Vogue Business Talent, which is a recruitment service, on Wednesday. So we now have a dedicated newsletter for that, plus we have Roundup. So really, we've got 3 main core newsletters every single week. Initially, when we did our user research, they said, please only email me once a week. I have too many emails. But actually, we've been able to see as we've scaled these, our open rates have remained absolutely steady. And of course, it's driving more engagement on the website. Email, again, still our most important channel. And we're not talking about the audience numbers that you're looking at, right? Like, we're only going after the fashion industry. It's a very specific subset of people. So for us, user acquisition, it's very important for a new brand, but loyalty and engagement, that's where we're going to put more of our investment in right now.
Absolutely. And do you have a team devoted to the handle with the interaction through newsletter?
The whole team is 7 people, so we are all working on the newsletter and website every single day. The production is incredible. I mean, you told me it takes 2 hours to put together a news like that. I envy that very much.
The problem is the case of Globo. The newsletter, the daily newsletter, are made by the top manager of the newsroom. So the guy in the night shift write down the newsletter, the guy in the morning, open it and updated it. So between 1 and 2 is almost 2 hours, and then apart from that, you have to clean your base from every month. You have to clean your base, skipping from people that doesn't read you, and especially to not upset people that are receiving lots of email from you. This is a product that should be manageable for different teams at the same time in the same line. And for us, in the case of Globo, was very difficult to find the right way to write, the right tune. What kind of dialogue you can establish with the readers.
And where were you finding that? Were readers writing back, and were you having different kinds of conversations than you were on the website or on social?
It's a subject that we at Globo are not treating very well right now. It's a learning, because in the newsroom, especially in this moment, in the last 2 years, we opened many different fronts at the same time. So the newsletter is just one of them.
course, that's our main one. And we talked earlier about how for magazines and for trade publications, newsletters have worked quite well as they've evolved. But your view is that newspapers have had a harder time. Who in the newspaper industry, who do you think is doing newsletters really well?
Well, personally, I think the New York Times was the best example. I take it from myself because I read at least, I consume at least 2 or 3 newsletters from New York Times, and I feel very comfortable. I feel like I'm a partnership. I'm a membership of a very important team. But this example is so hard to follow. It's not easy. No, first because the amount of content they have. No, second the way they write it, the experience, and it's impressive how much they know me. This is one thing that take my attention. And it's interesting thinking right now that in case of O Globo produce, for instance, almost 7,000 articles per month. Of course, mostly of those articles won't have space in the front page, in the home page. So you have to share it through all their channels. So newsletter is a good way to do that. But the response, they give back just few page views, few unique visitors from that, unfortunately. But reading a newsletter is a very comfortable way. Because it's curated, it is sought for you. It's a good way to be in touch with your most important client.
And it's interesting, Wired in the U.S. launched a paywall about, I think, just over a year ago. And Nick Thompson, the editor-in-chief of Wired, recently put up a post and said, what's worked for us. And of course, it was a range of different articles that converted, but the investigation they did on Facebook was the #1 converter. But also, I was surprised to see, actually, Twitter was even more important for getting people to convert on the paywall than newsletters were.
My feeling is Twitter is more professional. No, people that is consuming Twitter is for information. No, and let me ask you something. Where did you get from where did you get the database for start the newsletter? From the Holy Properties, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. Susan Menkes runs a CNI luxury conference, so we initially emailed out that base, said, this is right before GDPR came out. We said, would anyone like to be involved in this beta we're working on? We ran a couple ads in the British Vogue newsletter again saying, we're testing this fashion industry newsletter, feel free to sign up. And then, of course, we wanted to make sure it was global, so across our 31 markets, we asked people, did they know anyone that they could add to this? So that's where we built our base. It was just 250 people. Again, we quickly realized that wasn't going to be sufficient for A/B testing. Yeah. So we asked that base, could you forward this to 5 of your colleagues? And then, within a week, we had 1,000.
A warm invitation. Something like that. A warm invitation, something like that. Because for companies that had more than one brand, it's nice to cross the audience, the data from the audience, because you can, by the end, you can generate another business. This is something that O Globo is trying to do like a company. Because they can sell things over the holy brands and also communicate with new audience that would not be with you at the beginning, of one hand at the beginning.
And as you mentioned, user acquisition for newsletters is difficult, but it's amazing to me every time we launch a member get member campaign, which is simple as, could you forward this to 5 of your colleagues? How many people will actually personally write back to me and they said, I really thought about this. These are the 5 people I decided to include in the beta or post-launch that I really want to receive this newsletter, and that has been such an effective tool for us. Sometimes the obvious answers are there. It's not about optimizing your Instagram campaign.
Yeah, it's a bit different, no? That's amazing. It's very good. One thing that's interesting in newsletter, that is my doubt, is how many pictures you can place on it, how many audios you can place in it, because a newsletter is a kind of a summary magazine. In the experience of reading a newsletter is an email experience. So you cannot upload so much things on it. And we tried different solutions at O Globo, but by the end we reduced the number of pictures. We use just few, depends on the segment, but in your case it's mandatory. use
Well,
a picture.
we're not publishing the same volume, right? So we're only doing about 10 stories a week, which means we can fit everything in our newsletter. I hope there's a point where we actually have to make those decisions. But you know, we are running A/B tests constantly, so we know what images readers are going to respond to. We've constantly changing the format. We used to list 3 key takeaways underneath every single story. What we actually found out was that people then weren't going to click to read the story, so we reduced that to 1 key takeaway. So it's a format. We're constantly experimenting with formats, headlines, everything, and you've got to keep doing that because the readers will keep surprising you.
As we did there.
Yeah.
There is no way. You have to, one thing that works for a month, the following month doesn't work anymore because you don't get the same results.
Yeah, but in terms of the visual element is really interesting actually, because we got very negative feedback from our readers initially about the website design because we're using the same CMS that we use to power the Vogues and GQs, and it's very visual. And most trade publications, of course, you get on the home page, it's all text. You're getting information immediately. For our readers, they were having to scroll a whole screen before they could actually get any insight. So we are working on our website design as part of that. So we have that on the one hand. On the other hand, we have a lot of really visual readers. They're like, I work in the fashion industry. Can you do this via data visualization? Can you please break it up with more photos? So you are constantly balancing the two things. But again, for us, it's really making sure we get that information to readers as quickly as possible. Some of our newspapers.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. This was lovely.
It was a pleasure. And thank you, all you, for listening us.
Chico, Lauren, thank you so much. That was really interesting. Really appreciate that. And great presentation, Lauren. Thank you so much.